Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night. I am your host, Shayna. This is One Track Record, and we are back with another bonus track episode. This one for the Three Sisters breakdown and what I'd like to call a fireside chat. Now, bear with me because unlike most of the episodes that I have as far as bonus tracks, this one may be a long one, and it's more so going to be, yes, a breakdown of the Three Sisters that I just spoke of in previous episodes. If you haven't already caught that episode, you may want to go back because this is the spoiler. And I'll be breaking down some history that is close to home for us native Long Islanders. Shout outs to John Shaft. Love you, big bro. Crazy how we're both from Long Island, but haven't met each other. But you still my bro. So I might just do a little something extra just on behalf of the people who have been counted out of New York history, especially New York pop culture, which is Long Island. Okay. Upstate New York and Canada, we already gave you your accolades last week, or a few days ago, I should say. So now it's Long Island's turn. Okay? Now, let's get to the nitty-gritty of this episode. Okay? So again, if you have not heard the Three Sisters legend that I spoke about, you may want to go back. But trigger warning, today I know I gave a trigger warning for the last episode of the Three Sisters that we may be speaking of genocide, but that trigger warning is more so of today's content, okay? So let's begin. Some of you may have been wondering, like the other bonus tracks that we've gone through on this channel, where I have a tendency to rename some characters, right? And I've also had the tendency to name characters where the original context gave no names, right? But here's why I decided to give the names of each character in the Three Sisters and the breakdown of that. So let's start there. So the oldest sister, we have Kateri, right? Now, Kateri is actually I want to say Iroquois name, but to be quite frank, I don't even like the term Iroquois. I'm going to stick to Haudenosaunee because unlike what I explained in the last previous episode, Iroquois was actually a name given to the Haudenosaunee tribe by the French colonists and basically conquerors, okay? The French called the Haudenosaunee people Iroquois because Iroquois is a French term that actually translates to black snakes, and it was quite derogatory. So I was just letting it be known that the Iroquois were, in essence, the Haudenosaunee people, but the names are used interchangeably, if that makes sense. Now, Kateri is an Iroquois name, but it has two meanings, okay? And again, Kateri's the oldest sister. Her name means pure, or it can also translate to torture. Now, for those of you, again, who have listened to the last episode, you'd know that it kind of makes sense. It's fitting because We have her as the older sister, and she had gone through a lot as far as having both Aquaho and Kai and Howie, or Kai, go missing. Literally, it seemed like her entire existence was just to watch out for herself and two sisters, right? And the way I narrated the story, I also gave you a glimpse of Kateri's perspective of both Aquaho, Kai, and then herself. Okay, because remember, she kind of envied little Kai. Little Kai got to do whatever she wanted for the most part, go gallivanting, playing games, being innocent. And then we have middle sister Aquaho, who just seemed to be in her own world, exploring beyond her means, right? And at first glance, it's just like, wow, that's really unfair because she is, in essence, a caretaker. You see her through every season go through such misery, it seems like, to make sure all three of them are okay. They're not oppressed, they're eating, they are taking care of the crops, all of that. Okay. Now, again, I also mentioned in the Three Sisters how each of them represented one of the three crops that the Haudenosaunee people thrived off of and still do to this day. So Kateri, name meaning pure and torture, was represented by a ear of corn because, like you also may have picked up in the story by her description, she had golden hair and she also wore a dark green shawl, the shawl being the leaf-like covering, and her hair, which are the little hairs that you'd find on a stalk of corn or an ear of corn, right? Now, she represents in the Three Sisters, aside from the stalk of corn, she represents the support system mainly for Kai. Because remember, if you look back in the Three Sisters, I also gave the significance on the importance that Kai, representing beans, gives structure for her to grow and climb and wrap herself around Kateri, or the oldest corn, right? Which leads me to Kai and Howie. So I know that was a really hard name to follow if I were to keep saying Kai and Howie throughout the whole telling of the Three Sisters. So I shortened her name to Kai for those of you who may be lost. Now, the name Kai and Howie literally means she carries her footsteps, and that's also from Iroquois. Okay. Now, some of you would be like, well, what an interesting name, being that in the beginning of the story, she seems to have kind of some trouble walking, right? She was using a makeshift cane that was made from a twig. And somehow, towards the end of the story, we see her with no makeshift twig cane at all. And I'm going to go ahead and talk about that as well. But again, she represents, from the Three Sisters, plants. She represents beans, okay? And again, she gets most of her support in her growth and her walking and her structure from Kateri, the oldest sister, right? Now, let's talk about Aquaho. Now, Aquaho, the translation for that to the English would mean wolf or loyalty. And I decided to name her Aquaho because she seemed to have been somewhat of a lone wolf. And I just found it also so fitting, being she's a lone wolf, but she's always been loyal to her sisters, Kateri and Kai and Howie, because even despite her not always agreeing, especially with Kateri, she still showed that no matter what, even her being a better explorer, her being able to travel untraveled paths, all that jazz, she said, you know what? That's my sister. I'm going to ride with her for whatever. You want to sit here and make a whole altar and all of this for little Kai? Fine, I'll do it, but I'm still going to do what I have to do. And I admire her for that. And again, she represents squash, which what? Shades and protects, right? She is able to keep moisture, right? And she's also able to protect against predators. So, what better name than one that would mean wolf or loyalty? So, we also have one other character in this story that I'm going to save possibly until the end, which would have been the Mohawk boy who I named Tahit, right? But I'll get back to that later. I want to get back into Kai and Howie, the youngest sister who represents beans, and why I feel like it was so important to tell the difference in the beginning of the story, where she was walking with that makeshift twig cane, till now, towards the end, she no longer needed that. And I feel like, for one, spiritually, once the oldest sister, Kateri, seemed to have gone across the river, but then be picked up by Tahit, the Mohawk boy, it almost felt like it was a transition to the afterlife, in my opinion. Now, I say that because the first thing that came to me, oddly enough, in the sense of death, would be what? Usually, there's a weird expression where somebody says they've gone up the river Styx, which kind of means they have transitioned on from life to death or life to afterlife. So when she was making her way across this river and nearly died, but then you also hear towards the end of the story, Okwaho, the middle sister's retelling of the account of how Kai ended up across the river and also her. It seems like they had transitioned to be stronger people, which kind of happens, or what you would expect to happen in the afterlife, where you no longer have certain things bother you, especially physical things, especially ailments. People actually look forward, right, of the concept of transitioning to what you'd call heaven, in order that you would no longer face pain as you would on this earth, in this plane, right? So, in essence, that is also why I decided to name the Mohawk boy Tahit, which again, I'll get into a little later if we have time. But one of the best things about this story really is not only looking at the perspective of Kai and Howie or Akwaho, but it seems that throughout this story, you really get the perspective of being the oldest child and watching the dynamics between an old sister, middle sister, and young, right? So, through the perspective of Akwaho and Kai, it's kind of like we get all of the perspective in Kateri's life that she's missing, They really do keep each other balanced, just like the three sister crops. And I absolutely love it. So let's get in. So again, Kateri, being the oldest sister represented by corn, is super protective, especially when it comes to little Kai or beans, right? She's super apprehensive or fearful and always acts on the what if. But at the same time, she thinks quickly on her feet. So she often allowed fear to hold her captive until it was her younger sister, Okwaho or Squash, that she then became encouraged or pushed towards executing a plan of action. You see Okwaho even talking to Kateri when little Kai falls asleep, trying to get into her head and let her know, like, hey, we got to make plans. And towards the end of the story, you kind of see Kateri go to Okwaho, admit her wrongs, admit her faults, and let her know, like, sister, you was right, sis. Like, I'm my bad. I was kind of tripping. And that is what I was talking about when it comes to the three sisters not only giving each other physical strength and promoting physical growth, but spiritual and mental as well. We love to see it. This is what this whole channel is about. All right. We talked about interpersonal relationships with other people, and that is what I will be alluding to with the next series on sibling relationships and children. Okay. If you also notice throughout the story in the perspective of Kateri or Corn, each stage of her life within this year, the story starts out in summer and it also ends in summer, right? And it also foreshadows what's going to happen to each sister as you see pestilence and disease spread throughout this field that they take care of. So, anytime you look back in the story, if you do go back, and I recommend you listen to it again after this, you're going to see that as the beans stop growing in abundance so that there's no longer a surplus, you then see that Kai and Howie disappears. Or as winter and the first snow is yet to fall, you then see the squash within their fields go bad. Then towards the end, when all three have crossed the river or the river Styx, as they kind of transfer their life from the old to the new, you then see the whole field that they left behind go bad. And Kateri remembering how her sister told her once a field starts to take up too much rot, it's time to pick up and go, almost signifying that field being the body. Once there's too much disease or there's too much illness, and disease being dis-ease, as in it is not at ease, it is time to then transcend to the next stage of life or to move towards life. No matter how uncomfortable it is, no matter what the unknown is, it is okay to let go. Sometimes it's okay of certain things in your life right now that seem dead to just leave it and move on. But being that humans are creatures of habit, creatures of wanting to know and to be in the know, we sometimes disregard what God has planned for us. The Most High has planned for us, and we stay in situations longer than we need to, and we don't have to, right? So that was the power that Aquaho had, the insight to let her sister know it's okay. I know that you're scared of the unknown, but that's the beauty of exploring. You don't have to stay stationary before winter comes, before those times in your life come that are bone chilling, and now you have no choice but to freeze. Now, let's take a look at again the middle sister, Arquajo, or wolf, or loyalty, right? She, in essence, her duty as a plant was to protect the moisture and shade and to keep away predators, right? So her persona was a protector. Really, Kateri, we assume, was the one who was protecting all three, when in essence, the middle sister, Aquaho, was really the brains of it all, right? She was the heart and the brains. She was fierce. She was full of insight. She was explorative. She loved to be by herself. And she was also kind of just willing to go after what she wants. She wasn't scared of what Kateri thought, right? She didn't necessarily let fear be the driving factor of her decisions, but she did let her fear push her in towards the direction of what she really wanted. She really wanted her sister, little Kai, to come home no matter what. Until she saw proof, she confirmed in her heart, like, listen, even when hope is low, I'm still going to go after until I get a clear no. And that's also important to note. Sometimes, as humans, as believers in the Most High, we find ourselves asking God for certain things, right? We ask God for, let's say, a relationship, a marriage, a promotion, a car, a house, a child, whatever it is on your mind right now. And sometimes there's a point in your walk with Him that He kind of gives us everything we need to equip ourselves. It's up to us to actually go ahead and say, okay, God has done His part to make sure I have everything I need. What am I doing on my part to make sure I get it? Sometimes it's moving people around you, or from you, I should say, so that you're able to maintain what the Most High is able to bless you with. I know I'm talking to somebody because it's Thanksgiving, and I just feel like most of us have so much to be thankful for, but instead we're always looking towards what we don't have. That was kind of in the beginning what Okwaho's problem was, right? Because she realized there's stuff that we don't necessarily have here. But Kateri, the oldest, the corn, was trying to explain to Okwaho, the squash, that listen, you may leave your current circumstance in search of getting something better, not knowing what you may think is better might be worse than what we currently have. There's nothing wrong with appreciating what you have, right? Instead of looking for more. But Aquaho confirmed to her sister, listen, what is keeping you here? When she realized there was nothing but pestilence, decay, things were not going well, situations were dying, the crops were dying. That is the driving push sometimes the Most High will give you, and to make you uncomfortable enough to leave your situation, so that complacency becomes a state of urgency to make your next move. He's already helping you. What are you doing to help yourself? Right? And I'm talking to me too, because just this past week, I am dealing with a situation where I've gotten all the signs. God has beaten me over the head like, yo, you don't see this? You, you just gonna keep ignoring this? I've been telling you about such and such person. It's bothering you, but you won't talk to them about it. So, you know what? I'm gonna make this so uncomfortable for you that you have no choice but to respectfully tell this person. And I want you to watch the reaction. Simple as that. And some of you are like, Shayna, what are you talking about? Yes, when you get in tune with what the Most High wants you to do, when you pray, when you acknowledge Him, when you give thanks and stop just saying thanks, shout out to Bishop Brenda Hazel. When you stop saying thanks and living in gratefulness, living in thanksgiving, making it a verb, you start to look at things a lot differently. That is why Okwaho is so important to this story. All right. It's not enough just to acknowledge what you need. You have to act on it. You have to go past your fears. You have to go past what makes you uncomfortable. You can acknowledge all the good you want, but if your circumstance right now, your complacency, your place of comfort does not serve you anymore, if you become the big fish in a small pond, you need a bigger pond. You need to transfer. And personally, I think the best way that concept is illustrated in this story was the chain of events the first time when Aquaho came back from exploring and let her sisters know of the Mohawk boy Tahit and them scoping him out with Katari teaching them how to crouch down, how to hide, how to scope out surroundings, to then the next time they meet the Mohawk boy after little Kai is gone, it seemed like it was Aquaho that was then keeping Kateri, the older sister, Corn. Squash is now telling Corn how to keep her cool. So love that, because again, we are seeing them help each other grow. We're seeing in this instance how Squash, her being a protector, is now helping Corn, which kind of leads to my next point. So we have little Kai, or Kai and Howie, which again, she represents beans, and her name means she who carries her steps, being that we again see the growth with her not being able to walk fully on her own before she transfers and she exists beyond the river Styx, right? She provides not just nutrients in the sense of the three sister crops, but I believe she also provides nutrients for her older sister Corn, Katari, because in my opinion, as you see back in the legend I went through with the three sisters, I feel that Kai actually gives Katari, her older sister, a fresh outlook on life, being that her innocence, her being able to think so positively, her allowing and instilling the idea of hope, of blind hope, which is what faith. We spoke about faith on this channel. For those who have not seen the original content of this channel, when I spoke about self-love and self-reflection, we spoke heavily about faith in those first few episodes. If you're lacking in faith right now, I suggest you watch those episodes. And that's real talk. Like I'm not even gonna hold you. Right? So again, Kai and Howie just being so full of life. She's innocent. And despite her needing full support from Katari, not just in her walking, she also needed Okwaho and Katari herself. And despite her being very vulnerable to the world around her, her curiosity is what kind of kept her from learning and growing properly. It wasn't until those same what ifs, the unknowns, that Katari kept herself crippled in her own mind. It seemed like little Kai was the exact opposite and helped that balance Aquaho, because you have as Aquaho's perspective, you have little Kai full of innocence, full of curiosity. Then you have your older sister, Katari, and she's just full of worry, full of second guessing herself. She became the perfect one to balance both of them out. And it's really just a beautiful sequence to see all of this happen throughout a year, because Aquaho, keeping an open mind and being able to compartmentalize innocence, as far as feeling bad about almost giving up looking for Kai, but then also being on the side of Katari, where you want the best, you want to be proactive, you want to be cautious of your surroundings. And now we're starting to see the balance of all three and why all three need each other, and no one is more important than the other. And I actually found it quite cute how little Kai really was important to the story, because she's the one who kind of helped Katari and Aquaho keep an open mind about meeting new people, meeting the Haudenosaunee people, and creating alliances with Tahit, right? Because really, if it wasn't for her curiosity, they wouldn't be in a better situation had she not disappeared. So sometimes in life, on the outside looking in, bad things might have to happen in order for better things to take place. So her disappearance for several months, basically an entire year, because she had gone missing in summer, but then she was found again in summer or spring, right? Signifying that it may not be your season right now for a blessing. And it seems like in previous seasons, you may have gone through a lot in your life, but make sure you're not like Katari and you're more like, again, Aquaho, who is looking forward, who has that hope, that faith that things may get better if you're just a little bit more proactive in the current season that you're in. So you may cross that river. Sometimes that river in your life just may be your own mind, your state of being, your way of thinking. Katari drowned in her own thoughts crossing that river. It wasn't even just necessarily um a specific type of matter. I know in the story itself, it speaks about her being in tune with the elements air and earth. But in that sense, I only added that detail because you also have different elements. You have different elements of matter. You have What? For those for those of you who understand the states of matter, yes, there's solid, liquid, gas, but then there's also what? A matter of the mind. And in life, like we spoke about a few episodes back, actually, you can actually heal yourself through matters of the mind. All of the disease and the pestilence that comes in this story in that field, the field, in my opinion, does represent the body. And in my opinion, we can take it a step further on a metaphysical level and call it the body of Christ, where each person, like in the Bible states, has its own function. You have the little sister who is there to give nutrients. You have the oldest sister who's there for structure, but then you have the middle sister who's there to give shade and drive away certain predators. You also have that within the body of Christ. You have people who are able to sing. You have people who are able to deliver a word that's not within the four walls of the church. You have certain people who are able to take care of children. You have certain people that are good with numbers and are able to be held as a treasurer. You have a gift. Whoever it is that's listening to me right now, it's kind of your purpose in life to find out what your strengths are so that, like the three sisters and like the people who are around you, you can help support them. And as you pour into them, they should pour into you so that you don't have to wait until it's too late or you're forced in a situation your back is against a wall to actually show what you're made of. You should want to do that willingly, proactively, diligently. And if you're amongst people who don't bring out the best in you, I think it's time to change your circle. And I think you may want to do that even before the new year. Be proactive now. Now, this is the part of the episode where again, I really want to place a trigger warning. So, for those of you who are not okay with the idea of genocide, I completely understand. I'm not going to say I'm necessarily okay with it, but being that this is Thanksgiving and Native American Heritage Month, and also we are celebrating Indigenous Day, I want to give you a full scope of the truth as much as I can, right? We want to acknowledge what happened in America before before today, before this era that we're in. Okay? The 1400s through 1800s were very weird times in history. Okay? For the Americas. Now, as of this point, I'm just going to make brief mention of the nature of the Trail of Tears. Now, for those of you who do not know about the Trail of Tears, it included a particular group or tribes of people who were forced to leave their land by the US government and forced onto reservations. And this was part of just greed, straight greed of the colonists who came here, pillaged America, used it for all of its resources, including being money hungry for things like gold, things that would make them money, such as certain crops, cotton, you name it, right? So the people who were mainly affected by the Trail of Tears would be the following tribes. It would be the Chickasaw, the Choctaw, the Creek, the Seminole, and the Cherokee. Now, many of you may have heard about the Cherokee being one of the most popular. Some say they were the ones who were more so attacked first and then had helped those who they were conquered by to then help conquer the rest. And either way you slice it, it was pretty brutal, okay? Out of those civilized tribes, they were more so of southeastern US, okay? So our story of the Three Sisters, again, was held in upstate New York and on the southern border of Canada. So many of you would be asking, well, why am I mentioning the Trail of Tears if we're speaking on a different region with different tribes? I only mention it because the Cherokee and other tribes also survived on the Three Sisters crops, corns, beans, and squash in combination with other things such as mushrooms, nuts, berries, deers, bears, birds, fish, squirrels, groundhogs, rabbits, a lot of things, right? But they would also understand the idea of three sisters, how you would need each other just for survival. The same way we had the Six Nations Confederacy with the tribes that I had mentioned in the Three Sisters, right? They also needed each other to go all the way from basically the southeastern coast to move towards the west. And this was the French, the British, and the Native American indigenous people who were fighting against each other in wars. Okay? Hence me mentioning before that I don't really like to use the word Iroquois, because what we would call the Iroquois or the Haudenosaunee people, they, the Haudenosaunee, were teamed up with the British colonizers, right? It was others that were more towards the side of the French, and they began to beef with each other for years upon years upon years. In fact, I don't believe it was until like the late 1700s that basically what they would label the Haudenosaunee or the Iroquois people were then disbanded. But they still exist to this day, both in Canada and in the US, but mostly within the US, not so much in Canada. But I mention that because, again, in the Three Sisters, towards the end of the story, right, we have Kateri, who seems to have turned a new leaf and is now understanding that Aquaho, letting her know the best thing to do is to be proactive despite your fear. And they had no choice but to pick up and move on. Them picking up and moving on with the Mohawk people was actually their way of subtly hinting that they too were victims of the Trail of Tears, where they had to pick up, leave everything behind them. Hence, the end of the story foreshadowing that, just like Okwaho had told Kateri in the beginning of the story, any time that you see a field with pestilence, with disease, with rot, and it's spread, you know it's time to pick up and find a new home. What these tribes went through doesn't matter which region of the country you were from, you went through it when it came to a pale-faced stranger telling you by law that they stole from you, that you are forced to move away from what you call home, pick up constantly, move, deal with disease that they brought over from their land. You're exhausted, you're hungry, you are now catching diseases, and thousands upon thousands of women, children, and men are now dying on their way to God knows where. Think about that. Think about right now, the state of America, where so many people are picking up and moving because of finances, because of better opportunity, that they're scared. They don't know if they're going to eat for the rest of today. They don't know if they're going to eat tomorrow, if they live to see tomorrow. But instead, the world wants to basically ignore that. Okay, we're ignoring Thanksgiving for the sake of commercialism and skipping to Christmas, where we now try to celebrate Christmas November 1st. We're not thankful for anything. Our families are torn apart. And these people, right? And in no way do I mean these people as derogatory, but you still have nations to this day of indigenous people who understand the relationship of it all. They understand the foundation of family, the importance of family, the importance of retelling each year the Three Sisters legend. They understand about the sustainers. They understand and know where their help comes from. But you have people who claim they know the Most High to this day that are not willing to give him thanks, that are not willing to find their purpose as to how they can get people to get closer to him. We just live amongst a whole bunch of ungrateful people in an ungrateful culture. It's disgusting. That is why I decided to talk about the Three Sisters. Because honestly, I'm tired. And in no means am I judging anyone. I'm also talking to myself because I've fallen victim of such a culture. And just me deciding to get off YouTube, get off the internet, clear my head, I started to realize there's a whole bunch of culture here in Long Island, where I'm from, that I haven't known, and I've lived here my entire life. So now I'm about to get into that too. Bear with me. And again, this is why I love Kai and Howie, or Little Kai, in the Three Sisters, because her innocence, if you remember that scene where Kateri, Okwaho, and Little Kai were first spying on the Mohawk boy Tahit, and how they had decided, excuse me, that they weren't sure if they were to approach him, how they were going to get rid of him, if they were going to get rid of what was happening with all these animals. They didn't know, right? But you see, Little Kai actually proved her theory that, in fact, all of us, or all the indigenous people, really are kind of one tribe. right? They all should work together as one body, like the field suggests, where everybody is doing their part to sustain each other. But humans now, especially in America, especially within households and families, can't seem to get along for squat. For nothing. How is this okay and how did we get here? And stuff like this also makes me think about that one social studies teacher I had in high school as a freshman. I will not mention his name to protect the innocent. Okay. But shout outs to him for literally having us throw our textbooks across our desk onto the floor and actually teach us what textbooks wouldn't would have what would have been the actual tactics of these settlers who decided to abuse these people, these indigenous people, take their land, take their crops, and make themselves at home in the name of what? Catholicism. Which don't don't get me started on Catholicism or the origins of it, I should say, because I understand there's Catholics that may be listening to me right now. But if you knew how far we've strayed from the original Bible, what was allowed to be in text by the Roman Catholics, what was taken out, you'd be disgusted. And trigger warning, I'm warning you from now. These are the same Roman Catholics who came to this land that, again, the natives, or I should say the Haudenosaunee people, call Turtle Island, this part of Earth, right? The United States. They came here in the name of Catholicism. They got their dogs on them to chase them, bite them, eat them, tear them apart. And also in the name of Catholicism, if you didn't assimilate and bow down to the ways of Roman Catholicism, you were burned at the stake by 13, representing the 12 apostles and Christ. If that doesn't chill you to your core and make you a little more thankful, I don't know what else to tell you. But I'm going to move on in hopes that my rambling has gotten through to somebody as to why they should be thankful that they don't have to go through such conditions. Okay? Let's talk about Long Island and how powerful and how much of a stronghold there still is to this day when it comes to natives. Okay? This is the Long Island Sound. Now, for those of you who have been with me for the past couple of months, we spoke about the English language and etymology, right? If you haven't already, please go back to my bonus track episode about the English language and you would understand why this spelling of Long Island Sound is so important. Obviously, we know to this day Long Island Sound is not spelled like this. But if you take a look here, we have the Canarsies, the Rockaways, which would make Brooklyn and Queens, because yes, Brooklyn and Queens are physically on Long Island. We then have Nassau County and Suffolk County. Okay? These are the 13 tribes of Paumanok in the year 1609. And I wanted to make mention of these because these are where some of the first settlers came, inhabited this land, and some of these tribes are still named with these names. Obviously, the one that may stand out would be Montauk's, right? Still named Montauk to this day. You have Manhassets, which is still a town, but a little more further east. Nissaquag, still a town. Patchogue, still a town. Merrick, still a town. You still have the Rockaways in Queens, and you have Canarsie, right? Why is this important? Well, in 1659, you have Wyandanch, which is notoriously known for all of my Long Island people. We always joke about how Wyandanch is allegedly ghetto, allegedly this, allegedly that, right? But maybe we should have a little bit more respect for Wyandanch. So in 1659, Wyandanch conveyed to Leon Gaudinaire the territory comprising the town of Smithtown, then occupied by the Nessaquake Indians. Okay, and this was done in gratitude to Gardiner for rescuing the daughter of Wyandanch from the Narragansett tribe who had captured her during an invasion of the Montauk tribe. Okay, so there were very prominent tribes here. And there were people who were already making an alliance with settlers. And it seemed as if they were then given incentives to not only be amongst colonizers or to assimilate in their culture, but they were given power. Till this day, you have sightings or experiences where people have felt uncomfortable, especially in the Long Island Sound, which, for those who understand, the Long Island Sound actually does, on a clear day, give you access directly across the waters to Connecticut. So many people on Long Island, they knew, and New York State, they knew how to travel through ways of water. So these highways like the Belt Parkway, all of that were once water. The only way to conquer these tribes was to take away their access to water. So spiritually, everything had to then dry up in order to conquer them. Okay? You see this here? This is also Long Island. This is Bridgehampton, Long Island. Okay? So aside from that whole kidnapping situation, right? Wyandanch refused to enter into any conspiracy with the tribes from across the Sound or by the side of the water of the Long Island Sound from Connecticut, because again, they had access to other different tribes from across waterways. Okay? They said, nah, we're not doing nothing with Paleface. We're not doing none of that. Save that for somebody else. Right? Many a monument has been erected to those less worthy of memorial than Wyandanch, the white man's unwavering friend, whose grave lies unmarked in the solitude of Montauk. Let's look at Montauk again, all the way over there. If y'all only knew the significance of Montauk, did y'all know allegedly the TV show on Netflix, Stranger Things, where they deal with 11 and the science experiment of all these children to check on them for all type of special abilities, I'll say, was actually a real lab experiment that went wrong in Montauk, Long Island. Did you know that? Do your research. And this is what I'm talking about, where so many things have taken place. So many strongholds, so much power, but they try to write Long Island out of New York history. I want y'all to pay attention to that. All right. Now, some people on Long Island, or if you're from Long Island, you may also know some names that were not on the map that I decided to also go ahead and add. Certain Indian names of Long Island are said to have had between Sawanaki, Wampanoag, and Pomanaki. Okay? Now, Sawanaki and Wampanoag were the first that were used in abundance or to show a sign of wealth. So these natives, right? They weren't some bums, okay? Long Island to this day still has this stigma like we got money or we come from money. We might have better opportunity, but we ain't necessarily, rich. Not all of it. Now, we have the abundance of quahog or quahog. Sounds familiar, right? Certain towns, especially in the Northeast region, like Quahog from Family Guy, which is actually a real town, okay? That is in reference to a hard clam, which is the shell of furnished wampum, which was basically a form of currency that they would use. It's a shell, okay? And again, where are they getting these shells from? Well, they're already by the Long Island Sound, by water. And I mention this also because we've come into a time where we're already hearing whispers of our economy collapsing, right? But the story of the three sisters and us even talking about currency when it comes to wampum between natives and different tribes is so important because as a society, once we lost the ability to farm and grow crops for ourselves and create our own barter systems, we're now in the matrix. Yes, we're locked in this matrix, whether you like it or not. And I'm not saying that to necessarily scare you, but I am saying that when it comes to your help, when it comes to your sustainer, some of you rely so much on the news to tell you what to do instead of checking in with the source, your strength. Where does your faith come from? Where does your belief come from? Where does your help come from? Do you make CNN Channel 12 your God? Or do you seek help from the Most High? Does he tell you how to move? Do you talk to him? I'm not even trying to be funny. But this society, on top of not making ourselves relate to each other within our families, not rely on nature such as the natives have. They taught you to turn away from everything natural, including genders. Oh, don't let me go there. Whew, trigger. Yes, they've taught you to go against everything that's good, turn towards everything that's bad, and now we're wondering why the world is the way it is, especially America. The Three Sisters really is a wake-up call in more than one way. Again, we need to look at the Three Sisters as a spiritual wake-up call, a physical wake-up call, an emotional wake-up call, and a mental wake-up call. The Trail of Tears doesn't necessarily have to be physical again. The Trail of Tears is kind of what's happening right now in the form of mini purges. A particular people in a particular culture are destructive, and they're trying their best right now to make you a scapegoat, to make people in the court of public opinion want to get rid of you. And all we keep doing is perpetuating stereotypes and justifying why they should be erased. Why? So this Thanksgiving, I'm going to end this on a good note. I'm going to end this on something that's more thought-provoking. I want you guys to focus on what I'm about to say. So back to the Three Sisters. Like I've mentioned before, the story initially starts in summer, but also ends in summer, making it one full year, or a revolution around the sun, where within 1 year, Kateri, the oldest sister, representing corn, learned to 1, be more proactive, 2, be more trusting, and 3, be more vigilant of her surroundings, right? In 1 year, Okwaho, the middle sister representing squash, learned to 1, be more grounded to her sisters, 2, be more empathetic towards her younger sister and her innocence, as well as her older sister, whom the world created a calloused heart, and 3, learn to accept her older sister's apology and to move in a way less braggadocious because of Okwaho being right, and to be more humble, to have more humility. She learned to walk in humility. Now we have little Kai, or Kai and Howie. Within 1 year, she learned to 1, be more guarded and not let her curiosity get the best of her. 2, not scare her sisters half to death and being a burden to others. And 3, to be more brave and rely on her sisters for strength and growth. Now, to those of you who have made it this far, what are 3 things that you are willing to work on from this November that you would like to see yourself grow in next November? Or better yet, what are the things that you've noticed since last year, November, that you've grown in, that this November you're thankful? I'll tell you one of mine. Last year, November, I wanted to focus on being more bold and being less scared and speaking my truth. and being able to walk in my purpose. I've mentioned before that as a child, I was a person who had to deal with problems in areas of speech. But as you can see, the Most High has given me a platform where the very thing that scares me or the very thing that I was intimidated in, He gave that to me as my power, as my gift, as my calling, as my purpose. Are you walking in purpose or are you playing? And to those who are wondering from the very top of this breakdown, I named the Mohawk boy Tahit because Tahit is the Mohawk translation of the name David. Why did I name him David? Because if you look back again to the three sisters, right? You might mention, or you might notice how I have mentioned, sorry, that when it came to the little boy Tahit's stature, he wasn't quite a man, and he was about the same height as Kateri or Corn, the oldest sister. Yet you saw how, as they watched him, he had a bow in one hand and a knife in the other. And the first person I thought of was David as a child, King David in the Bible. And when it came to fighting Goliath, a giant, they laughed at the idea of David fighting that guy, that giant, but he did defeat him, right? For those of you who know the story. Sometimes in life, we find ourselves worried about a Goliath when really they are as small as David or Tahit. These three sisters were so scared of Tahit, despite him being the same size as Kateri. They thought he was a Goliath when really he was a David. At what perspective are you looking from your problem that you think of yourself smaller than the problem? Is the problem really bigger than you, or are you able to take care of it and handle it with the help of the Most High? Think about that. I think it's safe to say that the Most High that we should serve is able to handle all of your problems, no matter how big it is. And sometimes what you may think is a problem is actually there to help you, not necessarily help you in the ways you think, but maybe it's there where you have to go through that problem in order to see the other side. Sometimes there's no way out, there's just a way through. If, again, Kateri didn't go through that river, who's to say her and her sisters would have survived and lived to see another day? I thank y'all for listening to me and my TED Talk. Okay, I'm gonna go to bed. Happy Thanksgiving, and y'all have a great rest of your day. I'm not gonna necessarily mention what I'm gonna be working on next as far as series wise, but I am gonna be working on the last fairy tale origin that I have promised that you guys have voted on, and I'm also going to be working on a few other things such as the little match girl as promised for bonus content, as well as the soul ties that is coming. It's on its way. Be patient with me. I thank you all for listening. If you haven't already, hit the like button, share, subscribe. and I will type and chat with you later.